Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss training the elements with walking, or walking with the elements. Walking with the elements is a very old and distinguished method of training the elements, basically by running those elemental forces through the ligaments and tendons and fascia tissue in the body. You greatly increase your ability to ground this into the physical. So, if you are an energy healer, or a doctor, or a martial artist, or anyone else who needs to bring energy into the physical very strongly, come along with 60 Skills and let's study walking with the elements. Welcome to 60 Skills. I will now discuss the requirements for walking with the elements. To train walking with the elements, you need at a minimum to be able to perform pore breathing. And the reason for this is very simple. At the end of every session of utilizing the elements at a more physical level, you are going to need to clear out the excess element from the exercise. So if you've been working with fire element, for example, you will utilize vital force via pore breathing in order to remove the sensation of heat, any red colored energy, and any sounds left over from the practice. This is to keep you from becoming imbalanced during the course of your practice. Otherwise, if you are familiar with the elements in advance, it is highly advantageous, but the elemental meditations will be briefly covered during the coursework itself. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss why you should walk with the elements. As was mentioned earlier, walking with the elements is a very old way of training the elemental energies. It was also mentioned that walking with the elements is a very potent way of grounding those forces into the physical. Why is this? Well, as it turns out, when you walk, you utilize almost every muscle, ligament, and tendon in the body in order to do so. So walking is inherently a whole body exercise. By utilizing the entire body at once and generating the element at the same time, you are streaming that element through all of the tissues in the body. This allows for a stronger grounding of the force into reality. It allows you to work with the element for an extended period of time. And depending on how it is performed, it may also allow you to experience the element at a very high peak amplitude or frequency. So the reality is walking with the elements is a very good way of working with them. And many traditions utilize this technology. For example, for any of those who've spent any time around Tibetan Buddhism practitioners, walking while repeating mantras on a pilgrimage is a very common activity, for exactly the reasons we just described. The repetitive use of that mantra while moving for a long period of time grinds that mantra into the body of the practitioner. Likewise, people familiar with Shingon Buddhism also know the stories of the walking monks who can cover hundreds of miles at a time. Well, this is an example of how they can utilize something like the letter Z from Barden's Kabbalah to conduct this. So the bottom line is there are lots of reasons why you would want to do this. In fact, in Theravada Buddhism, in the system known as the Forest Wat tradition in Southeast Asia, their primary body training method is in fact walking. Now in that case it is astral walking, and that is covered in a different course. However, the bottom line is that walking with the elements will greatly improve your ability to work with them by working with them in your entire body through all of the tissue. So, let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss amplitude versus endurance as it applies to walking with the elements. Different elements are trained better one way or another in terms of movement. For example, fire element is best worked with at a complete sprint, such as running up a set of hills. Air element, on the other hand, works very well for long distance running or simply walking over a very long distance. Water element results in a kind of slow, rolling kind of walk. And earth element, when practiced walking, is incredibly difficult and resembles trying to pull your feet out of mud. Now, peaking in terms of the activity is an example of using amplitude, or a highly generated level of energy with that element. This generates a certain kind of ability. The weightlifting exercises, for example, are a good way of doing that, as are the rebounding or throwing exercises from arts like Tai Chi. However, there is another kind of development that comes from working with these things over a long period of time, using a modality like walking. It increases your ability to hold on to that energy or that frequency for an extended period of time. So much like conventional exercise science, you have your resistance or explosive type exercises, and then you have your endurance type exercises, and they both result in different kinds of development. As a practitioner, you are going to want to be able to generate energy at a very high peak, depending upon what you need to do. However, you also need the ability to hold on to that energy and to continue to generate it over a period of time. So these are complementary forms of training. Use things like the rebounding and throwing exercises and the resistance exercises to be able to generate a large amount of the energy, and then utilize things like walking to improve your ability to hold on to the energy and use it over a long period of time. So for example, if you were going to use the letter Z from Barden's Kabbalah in order to cover a very long distance without growing tired, that is an example of using it over a long period of time. On the other hand, if you're looking to use something like vital force to throw somebody during Fa-Jin exercises, that would be an example of using the energy at a very high peak. So again, keep in mind, we have these exercises in order to develop your ability to hold on to the energy and use it for very long periods of time. For example, if you're involved in some kind of esoteric healing and it's your full-time profession, you're going to need the ability to generate these different energies, not just all of a sudden, but to treat people for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes at a time. The walking exercises are very helpful for this. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss putting the correct energy in the correct place. Something that is frequently not considered when working with energetic meditations is the fact that certain energies can only be stored in certain parts of the body. Vital energy should only be stored in the lower abdomen. Astral energy should only really be stored in the heart center or solar plexus area. Additionally, mental energy should only be stored in the head. The issue that people get into, particularly with the walking techniques, is they put the wrong energy in the wrong place. If you are strongly vibrating, say, fire element, while running for an extended period of time and focusing on the head, there is a tendency for that vital energy to pool in the head. This is extremely painful and quite damaging on some levels. So remember, if you're going to vibrate energy while vigorously engaging that energy at the physical, you need to keep your focus down here in the lower abdomen. Likewise, if you are generating lots of mental energy with an element, the focus should be up here. Otherwise, these energies tend to get jumbled up a little bit. They can get stuck in the wrong places. For the most part, not much will happen, but an inversion of your vital energy into your head can be quite painful and is to be avoided. So, to sum up, if you are going to use the walking technique, make sure you properly engage the energy at the right level. So, if you do it silently using mental energy, focus on your head. If you're chanting and vibrating the energy strongly, focus on your lower abdomen, so on and so forth. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss the different levels energies, such as the elements, can be used while performing the walking exercises. The most common way to perform the use of the elements while walking is to use three-part concentration, color, sound, and sensation, to form a ball above the head and then to stream the energy from that ball down through the body. At a very high level, you can use this to generate Akashic energy. Fair enough. On the other hand, if you're interested in generating, say, more of the mental components of the energy, you can generate the energy at the mental level, expand that awareness out using mental breath, and it will learn, your body will learn how to generate that energy largely at a mental level. If you understand astral breathing, while performing your walk and generating the letter and streaming the energy down through you, you can astral breathe the energy in and out of you. This will, generally speaking, slow the walk down a little bit, but again, it allows you to focus on whatever characteristic of that energy you are interested in. Finally, you can also pour breathe or vibrate, as in a mantra, the sound of an energy while walking. This in turn generates more of a physical level development of that energy. I will add, however, that if you're going to vibrate an energy, technically speaking, you need to generate it at the astral level for quite some time. The reason for this is simple. Your ability to generate energy at the physical level essentially requires you to build up the amount of energy you have first at the astral before it can be converted down into the physical. This is a common mistake a lot of people make with mantra. However, even if you don't really even know any of the elemental forms, you can simply pour breathe while visualizing the energy, and this will greatly enhance your development of that energy through your ligaments and tendons. So again, depending on what you want to focus on while walking with the elements, you can definitely channel which level of development you want to achieve with that. So I would highly encourage you to go purchase a copy of Barden's Key to the True Kabbalah. That's Franz Barden's Key to the True Kabbalah. So you can read more about the characteristics of the individual elements, with fire being represented by the letter SCH, air being represented by the letter A, water being represented by the letter M, and earth being represented by the letter umlaut A. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss equilibrium and walking with the elements. As one of the most powerful methods for grounding the elements into the physical, walking with the elements is also an excellent manner for establishing physical equilibrium. This is the establishing of all four elements within the body. Later on, when you learn how to perform the equilibrium exercises, keep in mind utilizing walking at the end of those sessions is a very potent way of firmly emplacing or interlacing that equilibrium state into the body. It's extremely powerful. For the purpose of this course of instruction, also remember that because these techniques are very powerful, you really need to pay a lot of attention to counterbalancing. So if you do a fire walk for, say, 45 minutes, you need to follow that with a water walk of 45 minutes. Over a short period of time, this probably won't bother you a whole lot if you forget one session or another. The reason why this is being mentioned is you can see how this can utilize a tremendous amount of time if you are not careful. Additionally, it's very easy to practice at a high amplitude or high degree of focus for half of a meditation, and then by the end of that simply being tired and not really putting much effort into the other half. So for this reason, you need to carefully construct the equilibrium of your exercises if you choose to use the walking techniques to train the elements. So start out with 30 minutes of fire so you know you have enough juice, so to speak, in the tank to still do 30 minutes with water, and vice versa. As always, air and earth counterbalance, fire and water counterbalance. If you have the time in your day to do an equal amount with all four elements while walking, after having already done your seated and standing and lying practices, you are going to find an exquisite degree of equilibrium is generated in the body. This is really quite an amazing thing to feel the first time it happens, and very, very potent. So keep in mind, you can generate a high degree of physical equilibrium just using the walking techniques by themselves. And even if you were to receive no other benefit from this at all, this is one of the most miraculous things about this practice. Additionally, the walking techniques by themselves, if properly pursued, greatly enhances your energetic development in a way that few things do. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss things you can do while walking with the elements. As was mentioned earlier, some elements work better for certain activities. So if you need to walk for a very long distance without tiring, or jogging for a very long distance, air element is quite good for this. On the other hand, if you need to improve your sprinting, walking with fire element is very good. Additionally, if you are doing martial arts type activities like Fa Jin with Tai Chi, movement utilizing earth element is a great way to shoot someone directly into the ground. Water element, on the other hand, is a great way to receive blows from another training partner. The body simply soaks the energy. So these are some very simple physical ways of utilizing this. To a lesser degree, if your elemental control is extremely good, if it's a very hot day, the generation of water can help cool you down a little bit. And most certainly, if it is very cold outside, walking while generating fire element will do an excellent job of warming you up. So these are some very simple examples of things that can be done with the elemental energies while walking. Also, what you will find is that utilizing an energy with movement is the best way to strengthen your ability with that energy. It is, in fact, one of the reasons why walking with the energies is such a potent way of practicing. And keep in mind, walking really incorporates any kind of movement. So you can utilize the elements, for example, utilizing a Tai Chi long form. This is an excellent way of being able to practice with a given energy for an extended period of time. For people familiar with Sheng Yi's 5-element fist, the applications are obvious in that case. So keep in mind, doing this gives you a lot of opportunities to work with things in ways that you wouldn't normally think of. And it's working with the element while you're doing something that most strengthens your ability to work with it overall. So again, just some things to think about. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss practice design in terms of walking with the elements. Earlier in 60 Skills coursework, the issue of how to put your practice together was brought up in a few different places. Simply put, if you perform your various meditations lying down, this largely generates information or the qualitative aspect of whatever you are working with. If you perform your meditation seated, this largely generates, again, qualitative with a little bit of quantitative or power aspect, because gravity is acting on the body, and so it allows your tissues to engage a little bit, and you can work on that. Standing, such as holding postures from the traditional martial arts or from various Hindu yogic systems, largely generates power or the quantitative aspect of what you're working on with a little bit of knowledge or qualitative information. Walking, on the other hand, is almost the opposite of working with lying down, in that it is almost all quantitative or power-driven development with a little bit of qualitative or information-driven development. Now, when you work the body a lot, it can become difficult to still the mind. The rate of respiration goes up, the heart rate goes up, and they stay up for quite a while. So generally speaking, you want to do your walking meditations after you've finished your lying, seated, and standing practices. There are a variety of reasons for this, but the main one is once the body becomes fully engaged, it tends to take a while to quiet down enough to where you can really do those single-pointed focus type practices effectively. So again, Generally speaking, you're going to want to do walking with the elements after you're finished working with the elements in a more stationary manner. Now, how long should you do this for? Another good question. Typically speaking, an hour-long element practice, for me, consists of 15 minutes of lying, 15 minutes of seated, 15 minutes of standing, and 15 minutes of walking. This provides an excellent level of development at all the different levels. It works all the various tissues, and it does an excellent job of fully distributing the various energies which prevent side effects. So in total, you should aim for walking to be at least a quarter of your practice. Can be more. And in general, it should be performed after you are done working with your stationary efforts. Now, if you like, say you're working with air element and earth element, you can do all the stationary work with both air and earth, and then do your 15 minutes of air walking followed by your 15 minutes of earth walking. That works too. So keep in mind you can break this up a couple different ways, but generally speaking, unless you're really focused on, say, the martial aspects of things where you're really only interested in physical or near astral energy development, or if you're only interested in out-of-body projection, then you really don't need to do much walking at all. You should evenly distribute the amount of practice you do. On the other hand, if you have a definitive focus and you don't necessarily care about the other aspects of it, sure, just do posture, just do walking or movement work, and you're good. So these are things to think about in terms of practice design. Let us begin.